Hey everyone, I'm going to take a little bit of time here to go over the lesson on eliminating ineffective writing. Go ahead, click here. All right, so one of our main goals when we write, when we speak, is to be able to communicate our ideas as clearly and effectively as possible. Sometimes this is easier said than done. Instead, we sometimes create the opposite effect. We fill our writing with useless words, ineffective language, fluff, often because we think it sounds smarter. But it usually has the opposite effect. It can cause readers to lose interest. It can make your ideas more convoluted and harder to understand. It can even make your readers start to doubt you as an authority if they think you're trying to fill your paper with fluff and not enough actual substance. Right? So we want to make sure that we are going through our writing and getting rid of anything that is useless or ineffectual. Right? So we're going to be looking at wordiness and poor style, because both contribute to what we would call ineffective writing. Let's look at wordiness first. Revising for economy. Many human individuals use more words in their sentences than are absolutely necessary and essential to express the thoughts and ideas that they, the human individuals, are attempting to communicate. They repeat the same thing constantly and say the same thing over and over again. Sometimes, instead of actually repeating themselves, they merely substitute various and sundry long phrases for a simple word due to the fact that it is their opinion that readers will be more impressed by this writing method and procedure. But in the modern contemporary world of today, good writing should never be wordy. It should be economical. That is, it should say what it has to say and then stop, cease, and desist. So, in case you haven't noticed, that paragraph that I just read violates all of its own good advice. It contains so many examples of wordiness, useless wordiness, right? Human individuals instead of people. Thoughts and ideas instead of thoughts or ideas, because thoughts and ideas are pretty much the same thing. You don't need to use both terms because they mean the same thing. Only one is needed, right? Due to the fact that, that's just another way of saying because. It is their opinion. You could just say they think, right? There's so many more in that paragraph, right? If we were to take out all of that useless repetition and extra wordiness, this is what we would end up with. This big paragraph right here could be condensed to this. Many people use more words than are necessary to express their thoughts. They repeat the same things or substitute long phrases for simple words because they think this will impress their readers. But good writing should never be wordy. It should say what it has to say and then stop. Not only is it easier to get through, it's hard. It's hard for me to read this to you guys, and I wrote it. I can't imagine how difficult it is to be another person reading it or hearing it. You kind of lose focus, drift off, don't really even know what was being said in the paragraph more than likely. But gosh, when you get down to this version right here, isn't that so much nicer? Keeps your attention, keeps you focused, and gets to the point. No fluff, no useless repetition, no wordiness, right? That's what you want to aim for. Obviously, providing detail is good. Providing adequate explanation is good. But in terms of your word choice, more is not necessarily better. Just because this paragraph up here takes up this much space does not mean it is automatically better than this paragraph that is significantly shorter. This paragraph is much better than this one. If this paragraph were this length because the writer had expanded on ideas, provided more details, provided more explanation, then this would be good. But I said the same exact thing down here without sacrificing any explanation. In fact, because I took out all the fluff and uselessness, it's actually more effective and to the point. So I don't want you to think that, a short paragraph is always the way to go, but it is the way to go if you don't need half the stuff in the longer version. You want to find that balance. I need to provide specific and adequate support, but I don't need to provide a lot of useless fluff and repetition, right? All right. So wordiness, major problem. Avoid deadwood, as I like to call it. So at this point in time, I must say that I need a vacation. All right. At this point in time is now. Why not just say now? I must say that I need a vacation. Why do you need to say I must say? Why can't you just say what you're going to say? I need a vacation now. Or his hair was red in color. Red is a color. Pretty sure your reader would know that. You don't have to use that phrase. Just say he had red hair. Or she was in a depressed state of mind. Depression is a state of mind. You can just say she was depressed. Or the hero of the story was an individual in the high income bracket. Who is an individual in the high income bracket? Well, it's someone who is rich or wealthy. So the hero of the story was wealthy. I am going to major in the field of sociology. We understand that sociology is a field of study. You can just say, I am going to major in sociology. So watch out for those phrases that we use that seem to sound better, but really are not adding anything to the meaning of the sentence. In fact, it seems, when you think about it, it seems silly that we included it in the first place. Why would we say his hair was red in color? What else would it be red in? He had red hair. When you think about that, it seems silly that we would have ever said it in the first version. But we do this a lot, especially when we are anxious, when we're a little nervous, when we're not so confident in our writing skills, when we really want to make our writing sound more elevated. We might be tempted to use methods like this, but it does not have the intended effect. In fact, it has the opposite effect. So you really want to pay attention to those deadwood phrases and try to avoid them. Here's another example here of some wordy phrases that we often use and how we can say them more concisely. So instead of saying she works in an efficient manner, why not just say she works efficiently? Or I'm writing you in the matter of my car. Or I'm writing you in respect to my scholarship. Why not just say I'm writing you about my car? I'm writing you about my scholarship. Or in many instances, students struggle with discussions. How about often? Or I'm going to inform you of the reason I was late. How about I'm going to tell you why I was late? You know, we do this a lot, these wordy phrases, and we could be much more concise and effective if we simply used a 1 or 2 word phrase instead. We don't need all of this. We also want to avoid pointless repetition. Now, remember, in the coherence lesson, we learned how effective repetition can help create coherence. But pointless repetition does not create coherence, and it takes away from the effectiveness of your writing overall. So I have some pretty common expressions that get used. Things like, the job was done to the utmost perfection. Perfection is utmost. That's what perfection means. You don't need both words. Or, his mental awareness was questionable. Awareness is mental. It is a mental capacity. You don't need both terms. Or she was born in the month of August. She was born in August. Mutual cooperation. Cooperation is mutual. You don't need both words. So think about phrases like this that we tend to use pretty regularly in casual conversation, and kind of check to make sure that you're not using them in formal writing. You don't need the repetition in these instances. All right, a couple more examples there. So revising for economy, getting rid of wordiness and useless repetition. But we also want to think about style, because style can lead, poor style choices can lead to ineffective writing as well. You get rid of the fluff and then look at what you have left to make sure that the sentences and the way you are conveying your ideas is effective and not risking a level of informality that can weaken the writing. And one way that we can weaken the writing is through what I call clutter words and then euphemisms. So clutter words are emphasis words. We use them so much in casual conversation. They easily find their way into formal writing, and they don't really belong there. So let's just look at examples. Just, very, definitely, quite, extremely, totally, rather, somewhat, really, actually. We use these words often. We don't need to, especially in formal writing. Actually, one aspect of a relationship situation that could definitely make me very happy would be to just have a somewhat adventurous partner who just really shared my extreme love of traveling. But all of these clutter words in bold here are not needed. Again, it's almost like fluff. We're using them to, it's an attempt to emphasize our feelings about a certain subject or a certain idea, a certain feeling. But we overuse them. If you're trying to emphasize something, you're trying to elevate it above the ideas in the rest of the sentence. We use an emphasis word to do that, right? But if we're using emphasis words all through the rest of the sentence too, and all of the surrounding sentences, now we've elevated everything and nothing is special again. So why not just say, I'd like to meet an adventurous person who, like me, loves traveling. That's all you need. Or actually, I am very definitely in love with you. I am in love with you. You don't need those emphasis words in formal writing. And if you do use them, it should only be occasionally when it proves most effective. You do not want a paragraph or an essay where the word just or the word actually is used multiple times. That is an indication that you have sort of dipped below the threshold of the formality that you need. You don't necessarily need super stuffy formal writing, but it is a college level piece. It does need to have a certain amount of formality to it. Using these clutter words can make it dip. Euphemisms as well, right? Again, euphemisms, something that gets used in casual conversation pretty often, not necessarily something you need in formal writing. And a euphemism is when we have sort of like a polite substitute for a less refined word or phrase. Let's see if I can. I don't think it's there. All right, well, thought I had more examples of euphemisms, but that's okay. We'll go with these. All right, so more polite way of saying something that could come off as rude or insensitive. You could kind of lump it in with being politically correct, but that's not quite the same thing. Here are some examples, to say that, when someone has died, instead of saying, that they have died, you might say that they have passed away, gone to one's eternal reward. If you're being really sort of irreverent, you could say they kicked the bucket, entered into rest, gone to Jesus, walked through the pearly gates. Those are appropriate terms to use in conversation. However, when you are writing a formal or academic piece, there is no need to spare someone's feelings. There's no need to use that type of phrase or that type of wording in that context. Or saying like, the child resorts to physical means to win his point. That just means the child hits other kids. You don't need to tiptoe around it in formal writing. Or the young girl shows difficulty in distinguishing between imaginative and factual material. I don't even know what that means at first. She likes to play pretend. She likes make-believe. Well, this is actually something that one of those real life situations, examples of notes that came home from the teacher and miscommunication ensues. So in this case, I believe, the young girl shows difficulty in distinguishing between imaginative and factual material. The parent was like, yeah, I know. She's constantly playing make-believe, or she's constantly, in a fictional world. But what the teacher really meant was the little girl's lying. But because they tiptoed around it and didn't just say what they meant, the parent did not understand that there was an actual problem. So that is a big reason why you want to consider, do I need to use these super polite, soft phrases, or should I be more direct? And in academic writing, you should always be more direct. In casual conversation, in real life settings, maybe going for the softer, more polite route is the better option. But again, not always, right? Sometimes you still, even in real life, talking, dealing, interacting with people, sometimes you still have to go for the more direct route to ensure that you are effectively communicating and that there's no miscommunication or misunderstanding. All right. Last part here is cliches. So cliches are very trite, overused expressions that sort of get passed down from one generation to the next. They're all over the place in pop culture or just culture in general. And it's one of those things where we have heard our parents use these phrases, our grandparents, maybe even our great grandparents. And, we kind of know what it means, but we don't really know what it means or where it came from. And they just keep getting used generation after generation after generation. Here are some examples. Hot as hell outside. Or actions speak louder than words. Or make a long story short. Or, they're just keeping up with the Joneses. Or, I don't want to say anything, but I don't want to rock the boat. Or, oh, I love this thing. It's the best thing since sliced bread. Think about who you're hanging out with. You know what they say, birds of a feather flock together. Or, curiosity killed the cat. You better be nice to that person. You don't want to burn your bridges. These are all cliches. Things that we don't even really, how did we come up with keeping up with the Joneses? What does that mean? I mean, we know what it means if we grew up in an area that uses that expression on, throughout time, but where does it come from and what does it actually mean? Cliche. You want to avoid them. Why? Because they are already overused expressions. It shows a lack of effort to use your own words to express an idea. You're falling back on expressions that have that you didn't come up with, that have existed for decades, generations. You want to avoid them to show credibility and originality, right? So avoid wordiness, avoid useless repetition, avoid clutter words and euphemisms, and avoid cliches. Doing that will help bring up your writing to an acceptable level. It's just one more way to make sure that you have good style and tone, and that you aren't risking being less effective conveying your ideas. If you have questions about it, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, you're free to go ahead and move on to the next item.